Emir Alışık, and responsible for ANAMED's exhibitions and events, and part of the team who worked on the Palestine from Above exhibition, which is the current exhibition at ANAMED's gallery, and you can visit it until the end of January. And in the following months, you will have more opportunities to engage with it through publications, talks, and tours. So there will be various occasions. And actually, this started last week with a crowded tour of the exhibition with the participation of our panelists today, Zeynep, Çelik, and Yazid Anani, also the curators of the exhibition, two of them. Today we are lacking Zeynep Azarbadegan and Salim Tamari, but last week Zeynep Azarbadegan was with us too, participating in the tour. I will simply and briefly introduce you the panelists and then leave the floor to them. Zeynep Çelik is a historian of architecture, cities, and visual culture, affiliated with Columbia University. Her scholarship focuses on the late Ottoman Empire and French colonies in North Africa. Her most recent book is Europe Knows Nothing About the Orient, a critical discourse from the East, 1872 to 1932. She is the recipient of prestigious awards, notably the Guggenheim Fellowship, the American Council of Learned Societies Fellowship, the National Endowment for the Humanities Fellowship, Doctor Honoris Causa by Boğaziçi University, the Vehbi Koç Award, Sarton Medal by Ghent University, the Georgia Della Vida Award by UCLA, and the Temayüz Award. Çelik, as you probably know, is no stranger to Istanbul's exhibition scene and has contributed to several exhibitions, particularly at ANAMED and Meşer, the neighbor institution, let's say. And Yazid Anani is a senior curator at Art Jamil at Jeddah. He previously held the position of head curator and director of the public program at the Kattan Foundation in Ramallah in Palestine. He was a professor at Birzeit University, contributing to the Department of Architecture and the master's program in urban planning and landscape. Anani chaired the Academic Council of the International Art Academy Palestine, where he also taught for several years. He has curated and co-curated numerous exhibitions and contributed to various publications and lectures. So please join me welcoming them.
Okay. The first thing I want to say is about the language. We will do it in two languages. We will be talking in English, but shifting to Turkish every now and then. And with your questions, please feel free to ask them in Turkish. We've done that with Yazid so many times that we can handle it. And if there's any confusion, anything you don't understand, just interrupt us. We're happy to be interrupted very much. This is the first thing. The second is that we're not going to give lectures here. This is a conversation between the two of us and with you, hopefully. We do not want to be formal. We do not want to be academic. Of course, you can force us into those directions and we'll answer you in that way. But we'd rather have a more relaxed, friendly conversation here. The topic is not a very friendly topic, but nonetheless. Let me ask you, how many of you saw the exhibition? Okay, for those of you who did not see the exhibition, we strongly, strongly recommend that you go and take a tour, because I don't even know how what we say will be understood without having some acquaintance with the exhibition. But don't worry, we'll be clear. Now, this is my question to you. This exhibition first opened in Ramallah at the Kattan Foundation 2019, right? And then came COVID, and then the world fell apart. And as you know, we decided to bring it to Istanbul I mean, we didn't decide. We thought about the possibility of how important it would be to bring it to Istanbul. And we didn't know who would take us, but very nicely, ANAMED and Ömer Koç himself stood behind us, and we rushed it. We realized the exhibition in 4 months, even though it is an adaptation of the Ramallah exhibition. There are significant differences. First of all, the space is very different. You had a big exhibition hall. We were spread out. Here we have a very narrow, but nonetheless very attractive gallery. So we fit into that. The second is the fact that it's in Istanbul called for introducing more Ottoman material. I think the Turkish population is very supportive of what's going on in Palestine right now, and also this cuts through class and everything. The whole population is in political thought. Now, given that, we were also very much aware that we don't know very much about the history of Ottoman Palestine. So we thought humbly, no pretension, that we would open a couple of windows into the late 19th century, early 20th century history of Palestine under the Ottomans. So, and of course, the third big difference was the current situation. The day we opened the exhibition, Israel attacked Gaza again. There was a so-called peace deal. Peace deal. They attacked again, and so many people were killed, and we had to address the current situation, so different from 2019. So those are the differences in bringing the exhibition here. I do want to bring, Emir mentioned the publications. There will be a catalog. We rushed this, so there is a catalog related to the Ramallah exhibition, which you can access through the internet. But we thought that we needed another catalog for this exhibition. And as we rushed the exhibition in 4 months, we didn't have the opportunity to put that together. And we've been working on this. It is going to be out in a month. Keep your fingers crossed. And it's really going to be a good catalog. And people who visited the exhibition pushed us into doing that. Without a book, this material is going to be lost, was the message that we got. So with all this introduction, let us start talking about it. And let me ask you a question.
Please.
Yes, he talked a lot. This is about the overall conceptualization of the exhibit. The very careful thinking went into designing the exhibition, and our main actor is sitting there. He's going to answer us. Of course, we worked as a team, and it was great to be working with this team. We exchanged ideas. Nobody went home and did his or her own work, but we communicated constantly. And actually, I have photographs of us working on the design, and they're fun. Okay, so I want to ask you about this overall conceptualization of the exhibition, and how does the design express the overarching ideas of the exhibition?
Well, thank you for this question. First of all, I'm so happy to be here, and thank you so much for coming on a weekend, early in the morning, to attend this conversation. Hopefully that it's fulfilling at the end. And I want to thank our two artists coming to Istanbul and being here with us. So thank you, Faris and Zeynep, for being here. The work is upstairs. It's in the last chapter, right at the end of the exhibition, and there's a table where we have the images from the Jewish National Fund of deforestation of Palestine, and there's a video there. I mean, you can really have a look at the video. It's their work. So thank you for being here. The exhibition, I mean, in order to talk about this exhibition, it's really interesting to go back to the genealogy of the exhibition. So how did it really come about, and how did we think about this exhibition? And it was a conversation back home in Ramallah on one of the coffee shops. Salim Tamari, our co-curator and historian, who works in the Institute of Palestinian Studies, and the editor of Jerusalem Quarterly. It's a journal that is very well acknowledged by scholars working on Palestinian studies, especially Jerusalem studies. So Salim was investigating some of the photographs from the German Bavarian squadron that sort of surveyed the whole Palestine back from 1916 until 1919 almost, and they've taken something around 2,800 something photograph of Palestine. So these photographs were basically surveying the tactical locations where, I mean, in some of them you can see the encampments of the Ottomans trying to ready themselves for the war, and the whole villages of Palestine were mapped. A huge segment of it. And basically they also focused on religious sites like Jerusalem, Bethlehem, and archaeological areas and agricultural areas. So, I mean, it's looking at the whole set of photography that they have and the whole archive of photography, you can understand that, because, I mean, this is also a sort of an argument between me and Salim Tamari. He thinks that the Germans were only there peacefully, but it wasn't like that. Because, I mean, if you juxtapose their area surveillance with the ethnographic research that was really mapping the customs and religion and the languages and dialects of Palestine, the geography, I mean, so from above and from below, there was a sort of mapping, German mapping at that time, plus the visitations of Willem II, that maybe Zeynep will give us more insight about that. But all of that, and the German colonies that were established by the Templars there. So you can really understand that this is a project similar to Namibia. It's an initial project of colonization that was stopped by World War I without their defeat and the Ottoman defeat, not defeat, but then the colonization of the British to Palestine. I think the Germans would have become a colonial entity. So this is something that we've discovered also.
And it also gives us a very nice window into how we worked as a team, because Salim resisted to the end of the design. No, Germans, Edward Said misread the Germans. The Germans were doing the right kind of work. And we said, well, look, it's so imperial. Obviously, they're attempting something else. And we had in the back of our minds that 23-volume documentation of Egypt under Napoleon III, where everything is documented, from the flowers to the birds, and Europeans were all very much influenced by that publication. The message is very simple. If we're going to conquer this, we better know it.
Well, I mean, these images were the starting point of thinking about the exhibition, because mostly exhibitions and exhibition making is really thought from the human eye level. How people look at the landscape, at the urban landscape, the natural landscape, how they look at social structures. So we thought that it's really interesting to think about how people used to look at Palestine from the sky, from above. And, when looking at 5,000 meters high, I mean, nothing is really visible except for abstract structures of cities and there's no life that you can see. So, I mean, it must have been, we're thinking that the pilots, how did they really view Palestine from that distance? How did they manage to perceive the life there? So we thought that Palestine from above is something that we would really like to investigate. But then we cannot really investigate from above without also understanding the life from the human scale, from the people living in the landscape. How do they look from their own eyes, from their own scale on the landscape? So we thought that it's really nice to juxtapose these two relationships in the exhibition, and therefore it unfolded in the exhibition in Ramallah in 6 chapters, and we also brought the chapters here also, but minimized them somehow and reinterpreted them to fit more into the context of Istanbul and ANAMED.
But you didn't answer my question. How does the design express the overall theme of the exhibition? I mean, yes, but there's something very simple about the design. I thought you've done a lot of excellent work there.
Well, it's just that the idea is how the chapters, the 6 chapters, which you need to help me remembering the name.
No, we don't need to remember them. They have to go and study.
Okay, all right, good enough. So, I mean, the thing is that how people can read the exhibition. Again, curation is power as well. I mean, it's what we do in an exhibition is also sort of a structure of power. So what we want the people to see, and in which order and arrangement, in what format, in which visual language, what to hear, what to read, and in which sequence is something that is about curating an exhibition.
So we did not curate a neutral exhibition. It's a subjective, collective, subjective curation that we did. It's very clear where we stand. It's very clear I'm not going to say whose side we're on. That's clear anyway. But it is it reflects our preferences. Even the way we selected the objects, I mean, some we did not like very much, but we still kept them and debated over those. Others were more uniform in decision making. Mm-hmm. So it was a process, but it is not. Don't think that it is this cool, objective way of putting things together.
It was a tough conversation, but then this brings us also to the layering of this sort of power structure. So it's not about exhibition making, but also what we deal with from objects and material. So all the photography that we access the archive to look at is also something, a structure of power. So who took these images? I mean, this is a very important question. What wasn't taken in this collection of images? So what wasn't really there? This is another question to look at the archives, especially image archives. And also what kind of broader collection that was, and then it was really cut down to a smaller one that is kept in the archive. What was discarded from the archive? What was this power structure behind it? What kind of institution that sort of commissioned these images? And we have to understand also technology of photography at that time, because it was very expensive for a German plane to take off to the sky in 1916 and take images. And that is a very expensive. So it's very important. Each image needs to be very considered in terms of what images the pilot is really taking, because it's expensive. So we were thinking about all of these in terms of how we sifted through the images in the archives, and therefore the selection of these images that you have in the exhibition was based on the way we looked at the archive, and then it was our subjective way of putting it. And also it varies because the scale of the image that we put makes a big difference. The number of the images, whether the image is with a text or without a text, it makes a big difference, because texts are very important in interpreting the images. And so it pushes people to understand what kind of images from the text. So we were very considerate about all these dynamics and power structures. Maybe Zeynep, you tell us more, because I mean, one of my fascination is the Ottoman albums, and I was always questioning how did they do it, and what kind of process that has been followed, and why these images were selected, and how were they interpreted.
I wish I could answer this question, but obviously I can't. And I haven't done, I don't know what commissions were formed, but there is a huge collection of Ottoman albums from that period. What I find so, well, where shall I start from? First, perhaps I should say a few words about the kind of selection process, which is not much of a process. We ended up by gifts to us, by offers about certain albums that they did not give them to us, but there are two albums that we didn't select them. They came to us, and we were very grateful. Ömer Koç's Railway album we knew, the other one on the Sinai Peninsula and Beersheba, we had no idea, and when we opened it, we were delighted because there was the establishment of a completely modern and very elegant little town, not with the best of all intentions politically. It was to settle the Bedouis. But there it was. So there's the issue of chance too in the way we selected or we were landed upon with materials. But I do want to say a few things about these historic visual documents. There is an album, as we mentioned. It's on the branch of the Hijaz Railroad from inland all the way to the sea, Haifa. It says so much about the political context and the cultural, social context of the empire only when you read it carefully. First of all, there is an unbelievably systematic organization. It starts from the Dara connection and says, so many kilometers past, we have this, so many kilometers past away from it, and it's a trail that takes the viewer from the land to the sea as they were constructing it. And along the way, technology, the newest technology, bridges, tunnels, and just cutting through the land, all of that kind of technical and difficult and interventions to the land are represented. But there are other things about these albums when you look at them carefully. As much as possible, they look at the landscape from above, of course, only from the hills, but that authority of looking from above. Some of the other things that
but I mean, I might
people.
I might continue on that because
You talk too much already. Let me finish.
Okay.
Let me finish and then we'll let you speak. People are included in these albums. So when we talk about above and below, it's actually possible to see who these people are, not by their names, obviously, but there are Ottoman officers there, engineers and administrators. Workers are not Ottoman, workers are local. And that's a very interesting comment on the construction process. But there are also soldiers in some cases, and they tell you, soldiers built this. If you look at the album carefully upstairs. The other thing is the language. It was meant for an imperial audience, so the language is extremely heavy and loaded with praises for the Sultan and so forth. Are representative of God on earth, with the Heybetli Sultan and so forth. Every caption is like that. In contrast to the album on the new town in Palestine, where the caption says, "A view of the square." So, the writings on these, the captions are very, very important. They are handwritten. No album was produced one time. There are multiple copies. I wish we could have a way of finding all these copies and putting them together. I was able to do that with 2 albums, and the captions said very different things. One of them, it was on an album on on a hospital, modern hospital. The captions talked about, in one of them, just the medical problems with the women. It was a women's hospital with the women posing. And I won't go too much into it, but it is really a fun album. The women have the tumors removed from their bodies in jars, and they stand next to them with their hands on it, and underneath it, the caption. Now, one caption focused on their maladies. The other album focused on who they were. What were their names? What neighborhood they came from? Almost as, I'm not going to say anthropological, but a sociological cut through the society. So we had to, of course, take this very carefully into consideration when we included this album, and so many things happened to it. A very good artist interpreted it. But here, I'm going to say one more word and then let you speak. I do not want to give the impression that unless interpreted by contemporary art, history is not important. History is important, and history tells us other stories, alternative stories. Artists can pick up one thing and build their own arguments, their own, where are our artists? They've done it very well, actually. They can build their own, the word I hate, narrative on that. But it isn't all about history. We were very respectful toward the historic knowledge as well.
I mean, one of the direction of this exhibition as well is how to sort of balance between historical data, whether through imagery, documents, incidents, texts, etc., and also how we reposition that knowledge today. So what does it mean that we bring this history now? What does it mean that that history that has been a century ago sort of manifested, what does it mean to bring it today? And I think here comes a very important notion of what contemporaneity and contemporary art means, which is really bringing moments from these historical and try to reflect it on today, because it seems that we live in a cyclical relationship in terms of time and history, but with different technologies and different power structures and different dynamics in our societies and in our political realm. And therefore, the album was given to an artist, Jacques Perzekian, who decided to go and understand these locations that were geographically located in the album. What does it mean in Palestine today? So he went to all these sites that has been presented in the Ottoman album and took new images of the landscape. And he done different versions of the artwork, one in Qattan Foundation, but then another one here, which is a juxtaposition between the Ottoman image with the contemporary image. And there you get so much shocked, because, I mean, he shows you the transformation in the landscape. But then we were expecting that Jack would really put in this juxtaposition so much of the Israeli landscape. I mean, you know...
he erased it.
He erased it, and we were in shock, because we're trying to interpret, I mean, the idea of erasure, which I'm going to talk about later, is something that the colonial regimes, the successive colonial regimes in Palestine, were trying to erase the existence of Palestinians from their images, from their whatever, and their depiction of what is Palestine. So Jacques erased it, and for us, it was a question was whether he wants to say that regardless to the political manifest and regardless to the history of colonialism, the landscape, the trees and the mountains and the plants will still exist until forever? Was it this question that he's trying to, or he was really referring to also the architecture of one of the most important projects, the Hijazi Railway at that time, of the modernization of the Ottoman Empire, especially in Palestine. He wanted to show that this history has been erased by the Israelis. So these were the conversation that we have, and his work opened up for us to sort of interpret.
And you'll see how he composed his images by using the original photographs, sometimes in a corner, sometimes in the center, but he picked up such good ones. There was one that I was going to mention, I forgot. It's my favorite photograph from the album. One of the Ottoman officers is pointing down to the rail from a height. This is what we've done. We brought all this civilization and modernity onto this land. So as you read them closely, you figure out how much one document can express. And in fact, the essay on the third, well, anyway, there are many others like this. But then dealing with historic material, other windows get opened up. On the war, World War I, we have correspondence from people on the front. Of course, we don't have correspondence from illiterate soldiers, but we have correspondence from higher ups in the ranks in the Ottoman army and the German army. They bring an intimate look into the whole scene and the power of the different armies fighting each other. And one of them really struck us. I forget his name, whoever he was, Fehmi Bey. He said, writing to his sister, we will be away from in 5 days, this is going to end. We'll be away from the British, the deceitful, the coward Brits. They are hidden under a surface of civilization, but they are the most primitive of all people. So you're thinking, this guy read through it all, colonialism, imperialism, and he is addressing the comfort that he'll have when he's away from the Brits. So there are other we included many more in the catalog. We did not have enough space here, so we have just a few of them. They also give us some information, again, about Ottoman modernity, the post office. How do you send a letter? How long does it take for a letter to reach, let's say, from Bir Sebi to Istanbul and sometimes to Europe? Because there are always stamps on it. So they go to another town and they get stamped again. They go. It is not that long, but they take about 15 days. So interesting communication patterns are pulled out of these. And again, if we hadn't paid attention to the stamps, then we wouldn't be able to trace this. But I think we did a good job.
Well, I mean, this part is very important, because we also put beside it maps from both the British and the Turkish, showing the war maps, how the tactics of battalions, different battalions, are really fighting each other. Oh, maybe mine.
I'm not moving.
Me too, I'm not moving. So it shows also how the different battalions are fighting and retreating and advancing.
Talk about the two memoirs.
And then we also juxtapose them with Khalil Sakakini. He's at that time talking about Jerusalem. So what we try to do is really bringing the local point of view, the above in terms of map and military tactics, where the inhabitants do not exist. It's all about the armies fighting each other on the landscape. and also the personal, which is the letters. And that section has been sort of composed in this way, just to give you an example of how we think curatorially about putting historical material together in that section. And then in front of them is sort of an art-related work. Maybe Zeynep can really talk a little bit about the historical fact of it.
Okay. What is going
I'll just put it somewhere.
in the exhibition, you'll see the model of a huge model of a clock tower situated on the fortifications of Jerusalem. Are we good? Okay. That tower was very typical of the Abdülhamid towers built all over the empire, right? And there's even a little document in the Başbakanlık Arşivi which says we have to make sure that this tower has an Islamic flavor to it because Jerusalem has all these Christian towers and we need to have ours there too. So it was, I can't remember exact date, but the first decade of the 20th century. And it was a beloved monument of the Jerusalemites, as we understand from various authors. To the British, this was an eyesore. They couldn't stand it. And we would like to argue that they wanted to demolish it because it was a very blatant symbol of Ottoman modernity and Ottoman presence. They were saying, oh, we're getting rid of these Ottomans, these despotic Ottomans, and we're going to bring you a very fair and just administration and society. And it just was not convenient to have such a visible symbol. So they ended up demolishing it. But recently, an artist group revived it by rebuilding the model in a way of respecting the past and modernity, and I don't know what else. But it's interesting. You can't miss it. It's sitting in the middle.
I'm going to talk without the mic. I think my voice is really loud and clear. I hope so. Well, anyway.
Yeah, you can do it.
Maybe I want to shift now to a bigger thing. I think if going back to the first question is the fact, I think it's not important. For the recording. Okay, for recording. Okay. Fantastic. I'm going back to the original thing. I mean, what do we experience going from the beginning of this exhibition until the end of this exhibition? And it's something that has to do with today. It's not only history, but history is an evidence of really reading what is happening today from a different technological, epistemological perspective. So what we see is a long history of survey that has been done by different colonial religious entities, the Templars from the German Templars, and we have the British restorationists that they've believed that they from the 19th century, and it becomes really the politics of the British Mandate in Palestine that the Jews should really return to the land of to Israel, the land of which is Palestine. And which really has sort of transcended into the Balfour Declaration, and then the establishment, the facilitation of the British Mandate of the establishment of Israel. And then we see the Israeli, and which is not really displayed here, maybe, but then there are so many archives, such as the village archives of the Haganah. Haganah is a paramilitary group that also used ethnographic research during the British Mandate, and also aerial photography to map the villages of Palestine, hence the destruction of the Palestinian villages in 1948 and the massacres happened. So that was really an important archive for them and data for them to sort of manifest and do their military operations in Palestine. And then we move also to the current involvement of the Israeli colonial regime. And it's all about showing Palestine as an empty landscape. I mean, we have also the Orientalist paintings, and we have also the Australian paintings that you can see there. It's always, the Palestine is empty. It's a beautiful landscape, but there's no sign of any cultural history of Palestinians there. And then the depiction of Palestinians either as do not exist or as pre-biblical figures, barbarians that are there just in the landscape. And the landscape is there to be occupied and to be civilized by modern Europeans. So that is the history that long existed until today. And we see that today through the images, that the influx of images from Gaza. And if we look at the forensic evidence that incriminates what's happening now in the genocide in Gaza, and it's doing nothing internationally. It's as if, these people are not worthy and they can die. I mean, they are not important. And you can see that historically as well. So, I mean, it's just something that continues to flow and to persist in terms of the Western imaginary of Palestine. And I think this is something very important.
Yes, it is. And we chose to show that absence, but not erase the colonial archive. Because if we erase the colonial archive, then we'll be missing a very big thing. So this is why we had to read it against the grain. And it's a very contemporary position to erase the colonial archive. And that you can do in many ways by toppling down the statues in some places or just not dealing with them. And we didn't think this was the right way to handle the colonial archive.
I mean, I can also continue by doing that. I mean, I remember reading also something that correspond with our exhibition at some point by Aisha Azulai, Ariella Aisha Azulai, and she produced this very interesting article about the ongoing genocide in Gaza. And she showed really a very interesting positionality towards the visuals of the image. So how the Israelis are using images, how the Palestinians are using the images, and how the international community are reading these two images.
Different television channels use different images.
For example, she says that on the 7th of October, there was this kibbutz called Bari, which has been destroyed by the Israeli military, it seems. At the end, the forensic evidences showed that. So the Netanyahu done a meeting with the diplomats and with the main international media, and he presented images. These images of the kibbutz being burnt. It's just post the destruction process. And he narrated the story of the kibbutz. The narration of evidence is outside the images. So you don't see who destroyed the kibbutz, but you see that the kibbutz is destroyed. But you don't see exactly how it was really destroyed. So he used these images of post-destruction and sort of narrate them in a way that he liked it to be. Put that Hamas destroyed it, the etc. terrorists, etc., and it turned out really. And women, babies were decapitated, and women were raped, etc. All this narrative. So the media such as the CNN and the Fox News and the BBC use these images with the same narration, while it's forensically does not exist. While the images that comes from Gaza, destruction death of people with the forensic evidence inside of them, that they are not really something that is really taken by the media. So you see also how images are interpreted, the structure of power behind images, that we think that images are supposedly very important forensic evidence of crime. With the Palestinian case is not. With the Israeli case, even the forensic is outside the framework. It is. So, I mean, it's just that the interpretation of images and the conception of how we look at images was really something very important. And we tried to show it in the exhibition in terms of the erasure and in terms of also the absence of the Palestinians in terms of the glorifying images of the different colonial regimes.
The erasure issue, this whole concept of Israel cultivating the desert, blooming the desert. So again, the idea is that before that there's nothing. But we see that even our Dalman documented flowers. And then cultivating the desert, again, that Ottoman town, Bir Sebi, they planted a lot of trees there. And it's this absence is mind-blowing in a way. There's another thing. I got telephone calls from people saying, wow, you know what we discovered about antiquities in Palestine. Because people go to Israel today, they go to the museum, big Rockefeller Museum, huge. The origins of the museum go back to the Ottoman times. In 1902, the Ottoman laws dictated the conditions of excavations. And one of those conditions was to document everything that was excavated in an area and send the photographs to Istanbul. Then, of course, Istanbul had this new museum. The Istanbul Museum decided which ones they wanted to bring here, and the remaining were to be displayed on situ. Now, how did they do that? They had a lot of valuable antiquities. They designated high schools, not just high schools, but also government palaces, police stations, all official buildings for the exhibitions, for the antiquities to be exhibited. Now, in Jerusalem, it is called the Imperial Museum. It's a branch of the Imperial Museum inside a high school. And of course, some things were brought to Istanbul. We show these, but that photograph and the fact that it is the core, there was a catalog, handwritten catalog. The fact that there was the core of the exhibition, the core of the collection goes all the way back to the early 20th century. We don't know. We didn't know that. We learned it as we were doing the research. There are other such museums within the high school complexes. Idadis in the empire. Konya is one, and the other big one is Bursa. But there are many, many others. So it's an interesting way of exhibiting antiquities and owning them, perhaps in a way that is more integrated into everyday life. If you put antiquities in a high school, they become part of the curriculum, I assume. How could they not? Then in a museum. So all of these little layers popped up, and they were concealed from the colonial archive.
I think we've been talking for 55 minutes.
So we should, yes.
Maybe we could now have a break and see if there are some questions, and if there are some topics that needs even to be more elaborated or discussed in a different way. I mean, we're very open to do that. Actually, it's a topic of very close to our hearts, and we like to discuss it.
Yeah, we would also like to say that this is an open-ended exhibition. We cannot put the full stop at the end. And in fact, what explains our position quite well is the artwork at the entrance. And it's understood better after you tour the exhibition, what is it that that artwork is saying? So the open-endedness is part of it. Two open-ended artworks give us the same message. Nida Sinokot's fantastic installation at the entrance. And at the very end, we mentioned them many times, but there they are again, the forensic architecture. Their artwork is about one village which was destroyed for the first time in 2010. Now sit tight, because if you listen to the end of the video, you'll hear that in July, no, you won't hear that. I looked this up. In July of this year, it had been destroyed 241 times. Maybe there is even more today. And every time they came back and rebuilt it. It is a sick idea to think that you can kick people out of their land and they will not value it. Why don't you go and live in Saudi Arabia? Why don't you go and live in Egypt? It doesn't work like that. And that persistence is, again, it was a caution for us not to put a full stop at the end. It's going on. And Nida says it's going on in a much more abstract way.
Final comment, I promise you.
And then we shut up.
Yes, definitely. But then I think the destruction of Al-Araqi film by forensic architecture is something to look at, because it's not an apocalyptic, helpless, hopeless future. And it shows not only the persistence of the villagers to rebuild, but also the whole idea of using that technology from above, the imagery by the people themselves to prove that they have a history, because Israel and its legal, political structure, colonial structure, are using British mandate images of the village that shows it's very high from the sky to a degree that the village, I mean, you can see, they were digitized, so you see some black pixels, dark pixels that you don't really, it's empty, and there are some dark pixels here and there. So forensic architecture with the villages, they use kites because they were forbidden to use drones and old satellite technology. They don't have access to that, of course. So they placed cameras on kites and re-surveyed the whole area again from an altitude that is capable of capturing actually the details on the ground. And they went to these dark pixels on the British photography and transformed them into really a readable landscape. And there you have the history of the village exists, cemetery of the village, the agricultural routes and roads and the division of agricultural land, the pen houses, the stains from the pen houses that stays for decades as a trace that they existed even from a long time. So caves and water wells and stuff like that. So, this is really to say that this technology can be subverted into also a tool of resistance and a tool of fighting the system with its own tools. And this is what forensic is doing. So, they call it now counter-forensic because forensic is a more term that is used by the state. So it's counter-forensic, that using the same technologies of creating a different narrative other than that of the state.
One more sentence. They did not just do this, but they also collected documents, written documents from the Ottoman times to prove what was on the land. So they triangulated their rights to the land from multiple angles. So it's a fantastic work. Please do spend some time with it.
Thank you.
Audience can ask in Turkish.
Of course, you can ask your questions in Turkish if you'd like to. Evet. Soruları istediğiniz dilde sorun. Arapça sorun. Keşke, değil mi? Evet. Yahut fikirlerinizi de söyleyebilirsiniz. İlla soru sormanız gerekmiyor.
Basit bir şey hem açılış olsun diye.
Hadi Buket.
The idadi bir üste bir, was it functioning at the time when they started loading archaeological finds?
Oh, in Bir Sebi,
Was it in
Jerusalem.
Jerusalem?
It's in Jerusalem.
Was it functioning at the same time?
Yes, yes, you
as a
had.
high school?
Well, this happened with the other museums in high schools as well.
Ah,
So just think of teaching history, and they were teaching Tarih-i Umumi, which goes way back, and having these genuine artifacts there must have inspired. I don't know. I haven't read. I like to dream when I study something, and this is my imagination. I just cannot imagine ignoring them.
Did you also say that same type of application that the idadis were in Konya and Bursa? Did I get that right? I wonder what happened to them afterwards.
I think they demolished them, unless I'm mistaken, but I haven't been there recently. So I looked at a lot of photographs, and there they have separate buildings in two of those. You enter the garden, to the right they have a little barrack, and you have the museum there. But it is so interesting that the Jerusalem one had a director before they even opened the museum. In the Salname, he is listed.
Very far-sighted.
Intentions matter.
But this is also bring us to the fact that the Ottoman modernity, I mean, in comparison to the Western modernity that was really brought to the colonies and to the global South, wasn't really something that has been, I mean, it was more trying to socially integrate, trying to bring a different modernity other than that of a modernity of control of the and subjugation of the inhabitants and extraction of resources that has happened all over. So it's a different type of modernity, and it was really very much interesting for me.
Different kind of administration. And this, of course, is a big topic for debate, and historians do not agree on this. Was the Ottoman Empire, did it become colonial in the European sense of the word, or was it different in the way it ruled the provinces? Well, you know, I believe it was both. Palestinians think Ottomans were great. Well,
Salim and I, not all of Palestinians. I mean, great in terms of, I mean, it's not that linear. So, I mean, it's just that they've been great at certain things and not great at certain. But I mean, there wasn't really this kind of, you know, if you look at the Germans, the Templars, the British, the Restorationism, I mean, and the new Christian Zionism and the Zionism itself, I mean, it's a total different ideology behind it.
It peeks through documents. The way Ottomans want to civilize, they use the word. Let's bring civilization here. This place is very dirty. Let's clean it up. I mean, the documents are full of stuff like that. But is this colonial? No, because they are doing what they're doing in other towns. How could it be colonial? They'd been sitting on that land for hundreds of years. It's part of their empire.
But that was the same discourse in Europe when the modernization was happening and building of new, I mean, the transformation of urban planning and towns. It was the same discourse about cleanliness because of the diseases. Yes. I mean, so it was the same language. So, I mean.
What is bad with the language is that sometimes you read the Ottomans and you think you're reading the French writing about Algerians. So, you know, and that may be one person here, one person there. I do not think the overall policies were European-type colonialist policies. But this, you know, historians discuss this forever.
Because, I mean, it's just that, for me, it is sort of becoming that the modernity is a sole European construct, and we only recipients to it, and I disagree to that
I
kind
think
of
we
relationship.
demystified this 40 years ago. I'm not going to go back there. It is not owned by the West. Modernity is a tool. We don't own it. They don't own it. Okay, let's get questions.
Thanks for your speech and exhibition. Fakat sorumu Türkçe soracağım.
Buyurun.
Daha iyi açıklayabilmek için. Ben Dilara Karasakız, mimarlık yapıyorum. Aynı zamanda özellikle son dönemlerde bir inisiyatif oluşturduk ve forensik architecture'dan beslendiğimiz ve işgal mimarisini biraz daha açıklayabilmek anlamında çalışmalar yapıyoruz. Tabii bu çalışmalar biraz daha Batı Şeria ve hani Beytül Makdis özelinde bir çalışmalar oluyor. Ama şimdi şu anda itibaren baktığımızda biz hep 100 yıllık bir analiz, geçmiş yapmış oluyoruz, geçmişe yönelik. Peki bu süreçten sonra eko kırım, kültür kırım ve mekan kırım üzerine Gazze şeridi özelinde düşünceleriniz ya da planlarınız var mı? Bunların işte sergi olur yine tekrar, yani nasıl bir izahla tekrar gelecek nesillere aktarılabileceği, tıpkı şimdiki şu anki çalışmalarınız gibi gelecekte neler yapmayı planlıyorsunuz?
Yani projection düşünüyorsunuz.
Evet.
She's wondering how this line of thinking will project into the future and what it means. Well, I think first of all we have to stop this mess. The killing of children and, not before thinking about how we can take our work into the future. I think they're priorities, and honestly, I'm not thinking of how this would relate into what this means in terms of future policies. They have future policy, they have plans. Israelis have many plans. Trump has plans for Gaza, as you all know. But
well, I also have the same position. I really don't know the answer, because, if you look at history, and we learn a lot from history, that genocide has been committed and will be committed in the future. So this is not the last human genocide. It seems that this is really human nature, after all. Some people wouldn't really like that, but history tells us that this is happening and will still happen. And the idea of this continuation of the modernist project, of colonial project, it's still, until today, and you read the same practices, but with a different technological framing, and so it really continues. So I'm not sure where it's going to end and how it's going to end. South Africa ended at a certain point, but then there's so many. So it just, I don't know.
you see, architects have a tendency, I was trained as an architect, we have a tendency to find solutions. The way they teach us architecture, you take a design problem and you solve it. How can we solve these huge problems? I don't know. But I congratulate you on your workshop, and maybe you can tell us more.
Maybe the artists, if they have something to say. No.
Maybe about your own work.
Hi all. My name is Faris Shomlin. This is Zena Zarour. So we have a small video essay in the exhibition on a postcard that was produced in 1901 for the 5th Zionist Congress in Basel. This particular Congress is very important in terms of, visually is very important, because it was the stepping stone towards developing what we might term a Zionist visual culture. So on the side of the Congress, there was, for the first time, an exhibition for artworks and images that accompany the Congress. And it was during this Congress as well that the decision to establish an art school a Zionist art school in Palestine was taken. And this is very significant because the Bezalel Art Academy, what's now called the Bezalel Art Academy, I think it was the Bezalel Art School, Craft and Art School back then, was established in 1906. And this was the first Zionist institution to be established inside Palestine. So while the JNF, the Jewish National Fund, was established in 1901, but it was established outside, this is the first institution to be established. So the first kind of step towards colonizing Palestine was an art school. And the idea behind this art school was to invent something called a Jewish art. And I think no self-respected art historian would talk about this term today as an art form, but it is only talked about as a kind of a political colonial project. So our handling of this postcard in this video is to understand the ideological foundations of this image that's produced in 1901, because it is an image that has been reproduced up until today in different pictures. So there are different pictures of the same image, of the same ideological concept, which is a foundational notion in Zionism, which is called the negation of exile. And I don't want to talk too long, but to put it simply, it's the idea that there is a contradiction, there is a dual alienation in Palestine. It's on the one hand the alienation of the Jewish people from Palestine, and in that alienation being in the diaspora and the exile, and in this alienation the Jewish population become all they carry all these attributes, such as negative attributes such as femininity, weakness, and unproductivity, and these are all the anti-Semitic kind of stereotypes of being Jewish. And in order to negate these negative attributes, they have to reunite with the land. But on the other hand, there's another alienation which is more relevant to the context of that section of the exhibition, is that Palestine itself is alienated without a Jewish population, because and in this alienation, Palestine is no longer a historical place. It's a mere abstraction, and you can see it visually also with a complete abstraction of the landscape. That there is nothing, as the curators were saying, that there is nothing there but a solid black block that has to be cultivated by the Zionist project. And it's interesting here also, one last sentence, that we're all well aware of the colonial and settler colonial, specifically arguments, supremacist arguments about civilizing the savages. And in the Zionist discourse, there is in parallel, there isn't this, because they were not trying to civilize us, they were trying to eliminate us. But there is a parallel language about cultivating the landscape and making the desert bloom. And it's interesting because this sets apart the Israeli settler colonial project in Palestine from other settler colonial projects, such as the Americas, for example, because in the Americas, they tried to deforest the land in order to make it civilized. But in Palestine, they forested the land in order to make it civilized. So this is kind of a particular approach to settler colonialism and the view of that the land can be also savage and needs to be civilized or cultivated. Sorry for speaking so long. Thank you.
My question is about not much of the things we have talked about the Germans. I'm just trying to understand what you have just at the beginning of your dialogue, let's say, said.
you meant that the Kaiser and the Germans were actually trying to establish something similar to the British mandate in Palestine during the Ottoman regime over there in the Palestine area. Is that what you were trying to mean? And if that was, what they thought, I mean, the locals thought about it at that time, and what people, I know what you think now, and what your friend is thinking now. At least I have an idea. But the Jewish Quarterly editor friend. But what they thought about it at the time, and what are we still seeing its effects in some way or another?
To be honest, I mean, maybe Zeynep can help in that as well, is there's no referential text saying that there is, I mean, political interest in colonizing Palestine. But if you look at the infrastructural projects, one of them is the very expensive aerial photography that has happened during that time. And if you look at them, they're not innocent in terms of what they capture. So you see that it's tactical positions, it's resources, it's what the colonizers normally think about landscapes. It's how the landscape is a space of tactic and extraction. So agricultural land, holy sites, archaeology was really something very important. So this is one. And the other thing is, since the 19th century, the German Templars are trying to create what they call, and they still exist, German colonies in Palestine in several places. Some of them, they were abandoned, and some of them still exist, like the ones in Jerusalem, Haifa, and Jaffa. There's another one as well. So, I mean, this is another thing. And plus, if you look at the ethnographic research that has been also supported financially by the German imperial government, whereby the whole landscape was really surveyed in terms of flora, fauna, the villages, the built-up areas, customs, traditions, religious practices, dialects. So this is really a very expensive survey. And normally these expensive surveys, we know that they belong to, I mean, at that time, it was a colonial way of really preparing for their colonization. I mean, understanding the land. Plus the political, the missionary German evangelical Protestant churches that has been also diasporically spreading, especially in the areas of Jerusalem and around Jerusalem. So there's so many layers that sort of say that this is an infrastructural project of colonization, but it wasn't really sort of pronounced this way, at least from my...
It never is. Nobody comes and says, we're going to occupy your land. It just happens. But there are so many... This is a complicated question. When you think about the role of religion, we almost did not touch it. But it is a city that's holy to three religions, and that in itself creates so much tension. In the modern times, it didn't in the past. The Ottoman administration handled that, and like they did all over the empire. There is religion there, and there is also Abdülhamid's alliances with the Germans. We have a section documenting Kaiser Wilhelm II's trip to the region, and he visited everywhere. It was a big deal. They had postcards made out of it. Abdülhamid did not accompany him, but on the postcards you have their photographs together. So it was I also want to remind you that Ottomans used a lot of German technology in constructing the Hijaz Railway. Engineers, the whole idea was to make it so that only Muslims would participate in the construction, but of course there were not enough Muslim engineers, railroad engineers at that time, so they relied on foreign aid, and Germans were their friends. during those times. So they relied mostly on German. So it works on so many different layers that even though they never come and say, we want to turn this into a colony, it happens. I think it's in the intentions. Just the documentation shows that intention very clearly. Now, this whole German technical expertise is very interesting. I saw an exhibition in Berlin some years ago about the Hijaz Railroad. You would have thought that one day the Germans woke up and said, let's make the Hajj easy for Muslims all the way from Istanbul. So they constructed this railroad. The way history is written, you have to rip it apart in order to perhaps understand it a little bit better. Then it was so outrageous. Then they say according to the Ottoman preservation laws, everything that we have to find along the railroads should be documented, as I told you before, in that process. And they show objects looted from those sites in the exhibition. They say they meant objects like these. So acknowledging the looting is so complicated, and it's very difficult to explain them in simple lines, also to make quick parallels with other colonial regimes.
Thank you for your talk again. I was just going to ask, your question made me think something, and I want to share it, about the projection of architecture you were asking. It made me remember the Egypt pyramids. It's a very historical, let's say, architectural product. And it can give some kind of hope and some kind of relation with the people from the past. And I was just thinking, maybe it can be just possible to do with our technology right now, and we give a sign or a different kind of, let's say, collective or art work for the future. It can be protected because, like you said, some agonies, some other stuffs are timeless, some same human stuff. So maybe we can, is it possible, for example, to do it in Turkey? All of us just know that we just feel that sorriness here right now, but we can just do anything right now as an individuals, and it is very easily being political. But what about doing something just how can I say? I was just thinking with your question. For example, just create an architectural product in Turkey, in Turkey, and as a sign to the future, maybe with only, and maybe it can be just unbreakable with that technology right now. I was just thinking, I want to share it.
I think these are very noble thoughts, and I hope you move along the direction you propose. There's one caveat there. I think developing architectural models and offering them to other people, this is what would be good for you, would be so wrong. Developing some ideal solutions according to your most well-intentioned ideas, and then offering them as, why don't you do this? Look, we offer you this solution. So you have to be careful not to patronize what you want to support.
I can add a little bit on that.
Yeah.
Pyramids are monuments of slavery.
Yes.
And
there's blood between those stones. Yes.
you know, if you look at the history of monuments, you can see that there are men who are interested in eternal existence through monuments, through constructing their statues, architecture, in order to defy time, to, you know, freeze time, and they can really stay forever in the public space. And public space is very important, where people look at it and then adore that kind of person and adore their glories. And again, it's really very problematic to think about the public space that is owned by one man, and the glory of one man is really sort of giving the space its attributes and in its visual language. So artists and academics, at least the ones that I know, they're sort of anti that. Public space is owned by the public, and it's not only should really be always fought back. I mean, now it's owned by governments. Always been owned by the governments anyway. But then it's just that it should really be not the glory of one person on one regime that is producing the cultural and visual language of. And therefore art, exhibitions and artists are doing something more ephemeral. That exhibition comes and goes, but then it stays and remains part of the archives for the future to learn from, to study from. And I think I disagree with you that we are incapable of doing something. These people done this exhibition in ANAMED. So, I mean, this is something.
Yeah, but again, it's with question marks here and there, no solution. But I also want to add to this pyramids thing. I totally agree with Yazid. You know, when you look at the reasons why they were built and, you know, the labor that went into it, same with our Hagia Sophia, same with many buildings here, perhaps. But meaning also change, meanings associated with buildings and spaces change, regardless of what the fora may have thought over those thousands of years. People associated other ideas with them, and they got to love them. I think that's important. Monuments are not frozen in time, is what I want to say.
Yeah.
Yazid Bey, I have a question for you. This is something that I've really thought about. I've had the chance to travel around the Middle East, and, you know, the way we're taught in Turkey is that the Ottoman Empire, like you were saying, brought modernity to many of the lands that it controlled. But during my travels, it became obvious that that's not really the case. There's no love lost between the Lebanese or the Egyptians or the Saudis and the Ottomans. I mean, in Beirut, Martyr Square, which is the center of Beirut, got its name from Jamal Pasha's hanging of Lebanese freedom fighters. So the way we look at it, or the way it's taught to us, and the way it really is on the ground, is different. Now, from your dialogue, I understand that there is disagreement with regard to the role of Ottoman, let's say, quote-unquote, modernity. But what I kindly ask you, and consider that we're among friends, what do the Palestinians, in general, think about the Ottomans? I mean, you mentioned that part of the exhibition in Ramallah, you decided to scale down and you did not bring here. I mean, were there documents or photographs that you perhaps thought would not really sit well here? Or, you know, if you were engaged in a panel discussion of some sort, not in Istanbul, but somewhere else, are there things that you would consider adding about the Ottomans in particular that you, for purposes of decorum or being a good guest, choose not to share with us here?
Well, thank you for your question. And first of all, my background, I'm not a historian. I'm an architect, urban planner, and a curator. And but history is something that fascinates me all the time because it speaks about me now. So this is the introduction. The other thing is that my look at my point of view about the Ottoman modernization does not come from the nuances of this modernization in terms of this square and that place, but it's from a general perspective on how the modernism as a project, especially in urban planning, and had sort of started from Europe, and then the Haussmannization of Paris. I mean, by itself, the modernization project and the urban development of these towns were so much a project of power and subjugation. Paris and the monuments of Napoleon III, and then the big streets in order for the tanks and the train station to bring the army from the suburbs to inside the city, and to the old towns were not, they have alleys and small pathways that military cannot really control it. So, this is one thing. And then the accessibility of the products and the industrial products inside the city, and bringing all the people in and out the city. So the walls were not really important. So, that project of modernization has sort of evolved, and it was really it spread all over Europe, and then the technologies of the railway and the telegraph and other technologies were essential in the modern living, and the Ottoman Empire was really part of that kind of dialogue on transformation and the parliamentary. This also was associated with a political governance, which sort of more suitable for that period of time, that comes from the new political theory that established states today in terms of governmentality. The population was really now the target. The circulation of products and facilitation for economies, transnational. So it started from there. And when you look at the Ottoman modernization in places like Palestine, it wasn't really intentionally based on the subjugation of people, military, etc., etc. It was somehow, but it wasn't really. If you look at, for example, the project of the clock towers, where sort of it's something that you cannot really say that it's powered for sure. They want to be there, present, and they want to show that they exist in that, Industrial Revolution clock, time for work and time for leisure and other things. There's something that they wanted to bring, but it wasn't really that kind of there's no hegemony that I see that is similar to that of for example, the British, of the division of Jerusalem, and the planning of Jerusalem was really something that divided the 28 ethnic groups into 4 only. So there was something that, or the planning of roads, that in order for the military to control cities and etc., etc. So it's a different sort of modernization, although it is similar somehow in certain aspects.
It is all linked to politics. It's all linked to Ottoman reform initiatives. Because if the reform initiative says you've got to have the tax system is unified, I'm going to control it for the whole empire, then you need a specific kind of building, office building, for that function. If the schools are all on the same curriculum, see, there are many, many ways to understand this, but I think the political reform, we cannot deny the importance of the Tanzimat reforms. They take a long time to make it to all eras of life. However, they're what unified the empire. And perhaps here is the difference between other colonial rules and the Ottoman one. It's the unification of the empire. It is not so much the domination. And as to people in the Middle East don't like Ottomans, this is an old, I'm sorry, but I think this is an overused cliche. And especially when you read, for example, Rashid Halidi's books, he talks about the importance of being modern, not from the Ottoman perspective. The elites are, like in the Ottoman Empire, the elites are very open to change. So there is that. But there's also something else that he tries to underline, and I don't think people got it. The first parliament, the first birinci meşrutiyet, 1876, 1876. What was happening in Europe then? Just think of it. And so Rashid Halidi's position is, whose modernity is this? You claim this is yours when the Ottomans established their first parliament in 1876. So it's, by the way, Professor Halidi will be here on the 6th of November, and I encourage you all to come and hear his lecture. I don't know if this answers your question,
but I mean, for the material, we don't have so much. I mean, the Ottoman part was really minimized, not for
not for censorship.
No, not for censorship. But I mean, it was a huge exhibition, and we were focusing on film as well. So the film has been really taking so much of the space. There were compartments in each section that projected films as well. So we were focusing more on arts. Film and artworks. And here it was really the more focus on the Ottoman. There was nothing like that.
But I do not want to misunderstand when I said that, of course, our subjective views mattered. We didn't censor anything.
Okay, then. Thank you so much for coming here. Thank you, Zeynep. Thank you, ANAMED.
Yes, ANAMED always comes through.
So how do you think? Let's ask.